Hello, everyone. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that we experienced some technical difficulties during this episode on Luke's end, so we weren't able to record the way we normally do, and sometimes his audio cuts out or just doesn't sound so great. So just wanted to let you know that before the episode started. Also, I will be adding time codes in the description of this episode in case you want to skip to some stuff, because we are going to be tackling some news for the first 20 minutes of this episode, as well as the movies Talk to Me and Smile. So if you want to skip to anything, the time codes will be in the description. Now, without further ado, let's get into the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Casual Experts Only, now part of the Cultured Nerd Podcast Network. We are your casual experts, Mike and Luke, and in this show we talk about all things pop culture, nerdy, all that stuff. So in this episode I'm going to be glossing over some news in a minute, and then we're going to be talking about the new indie horror film, Talk to Me. And we're also going to touch on the movie Smile, which we recorded a review for it a long time ago, when it came out. It came out almost a year ago now. But the audio got messed up, so we're just going to talk briefly on it, because I feel like there were some elements in this movie, Talk to Me, that reminded me a bit of Smile. Anyway, let's get into some of this news. Not going to spend too much time on it, but there's some DC news to talk about, some other stuff, some strike news, kind of. So... apparently Aquaman 2 is a comic prequel coming out soon. I'm not sure when it's coming out, but it's just going to be one issue, whereas I think the Flash prequel was 3 issues, but it's supposed to tie into basically tie the first Aquaman and the second one together, kind of what happened in between. I doubt it's going to cover anything all of that important. They rarely do that because they can't really expect casual moviegoers to read the comics, I remember there was a prequel comic for Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 back in 2014. And I remember all it really covered, all it really revealed was how his suit changed from the first and second movie, and it was just something like Gwen was just like, hey, you should change your suit because it's, your current one sucks. And he's like, oh, okay. And that was pretty much it. So they don't usually do a whole lot, but they can be kind of fun, if you're into comics and stuff. But speaking of Aquaman 2, a couple weeks ago, there was some rumors going around that there was new reshoots, which I think there'd already been 1 or 2 rounds of reshoots for Aquaman 2. And a lot of apparently bad test screenings. But there were some rumors that there was more reshoots because Patrick Wilson, who plays Orm, said something in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter. He said something like, Orm is awesome. I was with him last week. So that made people think there were reshoots or something. But yeah, this movie does seem like a bit of a mess. It can definitely be fixed in editing, but we'll see how that goes. From what I heard, the screenings, it was mainly a pacing and editing problem. But yeah, I guess there have been issues for a while with this movie. The director has been having problems with it for some reason, so I don't know. But speaking of rumors, DC rumors, there was this report that came out pretty recently, I think just a few days ago, that Gal Gadot is going to star in Wonder Woman 3, and this isn't necessarily new, because what people are referring to is an interview that happened in June before the strike. But Gal Gadot spoke with Chris Killian from comicbook.com. And all she said was, I guess she was asked about Wonder Woman, and she said, I love portraying Wonder Woman. It's so close to and dear to my heart. From what I heard from James and from Peter is that we're going to develop a Wonder Woman 3 together. And that are people speculating, is she going to be, but there isn't really any actual confirmation. I mean, people were speculating that she's going to continue as Wonder Woman in James Gunn's DCU, but there's no real evidence for that, and she was very vague about it. So if anything, I feel like she'll be like a producer on it or something. But and
Right.
even Porter, I'm trying to remember his name. He's kind of a scooper, but he's also a legit reporter. His name is escaping me. Jeff Snyder. He has a podcast that's pretty
Mm.
popular and whatnot. But I mean, he kind of debunked this, but it was kind of just logical sense, saying like, why would they bring on James Gunn to reboot the universe and then reboot everybody but Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman? Which, yeah, makes perfect
Right.
sense. I doubt that she's going to be continuing on as Wonder Woman in any capacity besides maybe like a producer. A lot of people on the internet were mad, saying like, also James Gunn recast everybody except Gal Gadot, which, there's no real evidence for that. Her quote was very vague. So, speaking of vague, there are some more Fantastic Four movie casting rumors. According to Jeff Snyder, the reporter we just talked about a few minutes ago, he was breaking down the rumors he was hearing about the casting live on his podcast, I believe, but then he just kind of dumped them all on Twitter. And apparently, what he heard is that Reed Richards is cast, but we don't know who it is. Galactus is going to be the villain of the movie, and we don't know who's playing him yet. The Thing is not. No, sorry. Reed Richards is not cast, but The Thing is cast, and we don't know who it is, though. Vanessa Kirby is likely cast as Sue Storm, and Joseph Quinn from Stranger Things Season 4 will reportedly be playing Johnny Storm. And Eben Moss-Backrack, he played Micro in the Punisher Netflix series, and he was recently in Andor and the Bear TV show. He has been cast in the movie, not as the Thing, but could be the Silver Surfer. Now, I mean, I would probably take a lot of this with a grain of salt. A lot of scoopers have been reporting stuff on the Fantastic Four casting. I mean, just a couple months ago, Reed Richards was supposedly Adam Driver, and Sue Storm was supposed to be Margot Robbie. So it seems like really unclear what the actual cast is going to be of this movie. I would honestly just wait and see until it's officially revealed by Marvel before before getting upset or excited one way or the other about the cast. And another Marvel movie rumor, according to the Cultured Nerd, some insiders are saying that Emma Corwin, who was recently cast in the Deadpool 3 movie in an unknown villain role, she will be playing Cassandra Nova, who is the evil twin of Professor X in the comics. Now, she is the main villain of the movie. That could be very interesting, considering how powerful she is in the comics, and really kind of a deep cut character. I'm kind of surprised if they do, but then again, the Deadpool movies are kind of known for bringing in some pretty unknown X-Men characters. So this could be pretty cool if it's true. I definitely look forward to that. But yeah, let's talk about some actors who were in hot water about their comments about the strike. So
Uh-huh.
both Zachary Levi and Stephen Amell have gotten in trouble online because of things that they've said at Comic Cons. I think Zachary Levi was at a panel or at an appearance at New York Comic Con, and I'm not sure where Stephen Amell was, but he was at like some panel somewhere, and he said something along the lines of like, yeah, this was his actual quote. Um, okay, so it was at GalaxyCon in Raleigh, North Carolina. And his quote was, "I support my union, I do, and I stand with them, but I do not support striking, I don't. I think it is a reductive negotiating tactic, and I find the entire thing incredibly frustrating. And I think the thinking as it pertains to shows like the shows that I'm on that premiered last night, I think it's myopic." And he made like an official statement on his social media clarifying what he was saying, drawing attention to what he first said, like, "I support my union, and I stand with them." And then he
Mhm.
said, as for the "I do not support striking," what this means in full context. I understand fundamentally why we're here. My off the cuff use of the word support is clearly contradictory to my true feelings and my empathetic statement that I stand with my union. Of course, I don't like striking. Nobody does, but we have to do what we have to do. And then as for the, I think that is a reductive negotiating tactic. I find the entire thing incredibly frustrating. He said, in full context, I'm an actor and I was speaking extemporaneously for over an hour. I emote, but I certainly don't think that these issues are simple. Our leadership has an incredibly complicated job, and I'm grateful for all that they do. Despite some of my terrible early acting work, I assure you I'm not a robot from an intellectual perspective. I understand why we're striking, but that doesn't mean it isn't emotionally frustrating on many levels for all involved. I mean, yeah, it basically just seems like he has made some off the cuff comments that were, probably not worded as great as he or anybody, would have liked. But I think he was just expressing frustration that,
Right.
you know, he can't promote the show he's on, understandably. And I'm honestly
Right.
surprised there aren't
Right.
more actors expressing frustration at like the strike, because of course, pretty much all actors, are supporting this strike and fair pay for everyone and all that, and the standing against the
Right.
use of AI to replace their jobs and everything. But I'm kind of surprised more actors aren't
Mm.
expressing frustration at the restrictive strike rules they have to follow and everything, which is pretty much what Zachary Levi was kind of in trouble for, but it was kind of his was more of a joke, I guess, because he was just saying like
Yeah.
he can't, he isn't allowed to talk about his past movies and shows like Shazam and Chuck and Tangled and stuff, and he um said, like I'm not allowed to talk about those things, and that's dumb or something. Which I mean, I don't think that's actually the rules, is it? Like I think you just keep.
No, I think it's like any
Yeah.
promotion. So like if you wanted if some Comic Con somewhere invited you just to be on a panel, as long as you're not promoting anything, it's fine. You can go on podcasts or do whatever as long as you're not
Hmm.
actively promoting any projects. I think that's fine. And I'm not even sure like if that includes like what Zachary
Yeah.
Levi was talking about, like movies that were out for like 10 years. I'm not sure if that includes
Right.
those or not. But I mean, I get why they're frustrated, but it also it makes sense because like if you were still allowed to promote things, then I don't think the studio would really I don't think the studio would feel it as much as if like no, we're completely stopping. It makes sense, you got to strike across the board to really, make them feel it.
So it's I'm not really sure. I guess maybe that stuff might talking about his previous work might be considered promotion, but I don't know if that's kind of a gray area, I guess.
Right.
But it was obviously just an
Yeah.
offhanded
Yeah,
thing, and it's
exactly.
like, yeah, okay. And then people online were getting all mad, which I feel like it seems like the people getting mad are just random people on Twitter. It's like who aren't actors or writers, so I think they just like to feel morally superior. But um,
Right.
anyway, he got on social media on Instagram and clarify what he was saying. It is kind of funny how this always happens. Like somebody says something, people on Twitter get pissed, and then the person gets on the internet and says like, "Oh, what I actually meant," or apologizes. Um, but anyway, he said it's come to my attention that an offhand remark I made in jest last weekend is being taken out of context. So let me be very clear. I fully support my union, the WGA, and the strike. I remain an outspoken critic of the exploitative system that us artists are subject to work in since I started my journey in the business 25 years ago. This strike is necessary to protect ourselves, our writers, and all those working in production. We make the industry move. We need to be striking. We should have done this years ago. But anyway, we have actors who are getting in hot water online for seemingly speaking out against the strike. And now we also have somebody who is in trouble for supporting the strike. It's just nobody. So Rachel Zegler, who was in West Side Story and
Yeah.
Shazam 2, and is going to be the new Snow White.
Hmm.
She was speaking to Entertainment Tonight while on the picket lines of the strike, and she was speaking in support of streaming residuals.
Yeah.
and she was kind of referring to when Snow White hit streaming like on Disney Plus, and she said, if I'm going to stand there 18 hours a day in the dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that is streamed online, which
Right.
isn't too crazy because that's what happens when movies stream, or not stream, but are played on like cable and stuff. Companies
Right.
get residuals, or they get paid for that, and then everyone who worked on it gets residuals. So
Right.
that's one of the things the actors and writers are striking about, getting streaming residuals. But then people online, were seemingly more conservative bent, were saying she was like, so somebody said something like liberal privilege or something like, what? Didn't realize that was a
Right.
thing. But and just like calling her entitled and stuff. And she tweeted like, is it entitled? Like, I didn't realize it was entitled to before being paid fairly, but okay.
Right.
Yeah, so that's like kind of stupid. You just can never win. Like, oh,
Exactly.
but anyway, moving on to a few other bits of news. David Ayers made a statement on, well, he tweeted something about his cut of Suicide Squad, saying that James Gunn told him it would have its time to be shared. Now, this whole thing started when David Ayer posted some old photo of Jared Leto's Joker, presumably
Right.
a behind the scenes shot of from Suicide Squad, and somebody like retweeted it and was like, "Dude, this came out like in 2016." Like, okay, I guess directors aren't allowed to share their work anymore.
Right.
But he quoted that tweet, and yeah, he said, "What's your advice on how to navigate this situation with grace? There's a genuine curiosity and interest from a lot of people, and I'm aware there's another group of people that have fun mocking the film. Your comment is a perfect example of how many are magnetically drawn to the 2016 film in a negative way." He continued, "All I know is my unseen film plays much better than the studio release. The interest in my cut being shown seems real and organic, and Gunn told me it would have its time to be shared. He obviously deserves to launch his DC universe without more drama about old projects. In a way, I'm chained to this thing. I'm riding a tiger here and navigating the situation the best I can. Life's a very strange journey." So it sounds like he's talked to Gunn, and Gunn might, kind of said like at some point maybe it might get the Ayer cut might get released.
Right.
But that had a lot of people buzzing online. But I mean,
Right.
Suicide Squad isn't a great movie, but a lot of it seems to be from studio meddling, kind of like with the theatrical cut of Justice League.
Right.
So, I mean, at the very least, I think directors should be able to have their work seen
Yeah.
without studio
Exactly.
meddling. So, um,
Right. Right.
yeah, so Jay Oliva, who's like he's a storyboard artist, for a lot of DC projects, including Zack Snyder's stuff, and he's also a studio executive. He seemed to work very closely with Zack Snyder on his DC movies, and he was talking about Ben Affleck's Batman movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically said something along the lines of that the movie would tackle like 80 years of Batman mythos in a way that hadn't been done before. Yeah, he said Ben's story was going to cover something that had never really been covered in comics, but was building off of storylines in the Batman mythos over the last 80 years and approaching it from a new kind of perspective. And he also kind of spent the rest of the interview just kind of talking about how awesome the movie was. So thanks, Jay. Now we'll never see it. That's fun. I love when
Right.
people talk about stuff we're never going to see and be like, ah, that sounds cool.
Exactly.
He also mentioned that apparently Zack Snyder's original vision for like the whole DCU, it was supposed to wrap up like with like an actual adaptation of the Flashpoint paradox,
Okay.
and it was going to be revealed that Reverse Flash was behind like a lot of the events in the DCEU, that he orchestrated a lot of different things. Not clear exactly what those would be, but
Right.
that's interesting. Like that's kind of the first I've heard of this, because as far as I knew, like he wanted to do. I mean, this doesn't necessarily mean anything because it seems like Zack Snyder plans out a lot of stuff before it actually gets to like a creative, like they're actually like going to make it kind of thing. It just seems
Right.
like he brainstorms a lot, so this could have just kind of been one of those brainstorming sessions.
Hmm.
Yeah, his actual quote from the interview with Inverse is that at the ending of Zack's Dark Side quadrilogy, which I didn't know all of a sudden it's going to be a 4 movie thing. I always thought it was going to be a 2 movie thing, or whatever. We would end up with a Justice League Unlimited version of the Snyderverse. I'm guessing that means just a lot of different characters.
Right.
And then you flip it, you do Flashpoint Paradox. Everybody whose friends are now enemies, and it's a world that you don't want to live in. You can reboot the universe and introduce a new cast that way because after 10 years, the actors need to go onto something else. I mean, I'm guessing this is probably a very early idea,
Yeah.
like back when they were first like making Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, and it was the DCEU was supposed to be like, a 10-year like extended type universe.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I have no idea like how long these plans were in place, but
Right.
could have been cool, but the DCU got derailed a long time ago, so
Right. Right.
it's not like any of this was even close to being made or done. So
Hmm.
last bit of news, apparently Kevin Spacey was found not guilty in London in his sexual assault trial, so that's fun.
Yeah.
Apparently, like 9 people came forward to accuse him of sexual assault. Um,
Yeah.
and it seems like over the last few years, 30 people have come forward accusing him of sexual assault.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm just gonna say, like, just because like he won this trial doesn't necessarily mean he's innocent.
Right. And
Like,
also like it's way too late. He's probably not gonna act in anything ever again. Either way the case goes. But
well,
anyway.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, I don't think this is gonna mean he's unblacklisted from Hollywood. I mean, they
Right.
literally recast him in a movie he was in when this came out in
Mm.
2017 when he was like first accused. Though I will say, apparently he is doing like a voiceover role in
Oh,
an upcoming movie. I don't remember what it's called. Yeah, so I mean, he might be able to get some acting roles, but there's no way he's gonna salvage his career from
exactly.
get it back from where it was. And it seems like, I mean, if there are 30 accusations, like I don't know, it's unlikely he's totally innocent, but who knows. But there was like a lot of people that accused him of sexual assault, and like the original stuff back in 2017 was that this guy came forward, this like actor, I think this small time actor or artist came forward and said that like when he was 14 and Spacey was 24, they had like, I guess, some sexual encounters, but then Spacey kind of like, assaulted him sexually. And the problem is I can't really find much information on this trial and like why he was pronounced not guilty, like what the evidence
Yeah,
was for and against him. So
exactly.
yeah, they just, like this article just says Spacey was found not guilty of 9 charges of sexual assault and misconduct, with the jury reaching its verdict after about 12 hours of deliberation, and that's like all it really says.
Mm.
So yeah, that doesn't really tell you much. So anyway, talk to me. Let's talk to me.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
yeah. So,
recently today they announced the sequel.
oh, no kidding.
And the title is "Talk to Me," which I think is hilarious.
Wait, is that real?
Yeah, I think so. I saw it on
Oh,
Instagram. Let me check the source. I'm almost
yeah. So
the yeah, Rotten
this.
Tomatoes posted. It seems official.
Hmm, okay. You said it was a Rotten Tomatoes article.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Um, so yeah, this movie's very interesting. So
Mhm.
I didn't know like who made this movie or the context of it or anything.
Yeah.
Like until like probably a few days before I saw the movie, but it's
Mm.
actually written. Well, it's directed by YouTubers.
Right.
Raka Raka, who I
Hmm.
kind of like. I actually watched a lot of their videos back in the day, like in high school and everything.
Oh.
But they
Nice.
like they got kind of famous online for like this Star Wars versus Harry Potter video, and a lot of videos centered around like Ronald McDonald just like slaughtering people. Um, like
Nice.
yeah, they made a lot of this really cool, and like their videos were very distinct for having really cool stunts and like just an insane amount of blood and gore and stuff. Is like extremely
Uh,
violent. So that was kind of cool, and they just kind of dropped off the radar. But apparently, it's because they were working on this film. Um,
yeah.
and yeah, apparently they made this film for like really cheap. I think like including like I think they made it for like a little over 4 million. Um,
Mm,
I think 10 million with like marketing costs
sure.
maybe. Let me see. Because I've seen like two different. Yeah, so the budget was 4.5 million USD. Yeah. Um,
Mm,
apparently they made it with a couple smaller production companies, Causeway Films and Bankside Films,
uh,
and so it's like it's very independent. Like, because when I saw that it was an
right.
A24 film, I assumed it was produced by A24, but apparently it was only distributed by A24. So
Right.
apparently they made the movie and they got it into Sundance. They submitted it to
Hmm.
Sundance and they got in, and they got a lot of offers after its midnight screening, and they ended up signing a deal with A24 to distribute it.
Mm,
And for a couple of YouTubers for their first time making a movie, like
right.
that's really
Right.
impressive. And for four and a
Mhm.
half million dollars, it does not feel like that at all. Like it
Right.
feels like your average like horror, like smaller budget horror movie, but those are usually at
Mhm.
least like 50 million. This thing
Yeah.
was like 20, 50 million. This thing was four and a half. That's kind of crazy. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. For
but
sure.
yeah, what did you think about this movie?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it's really interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was I don't know if I've ever seen an Australian maybe I have an Australian horror movie before, but
Hmm.
yeah, it was really interesting. I really liked the how it was sort of like an out metaphor for like addiction. That was really interesting.
Yeah.
Mhm. It's a really like a bleak movie, but I thought it was
Yeah.
really well done. Similar to I guess we were going to talk about in a bit, similar to Smile.
Yeah.
I thought it was. And also, I don't know if you've seen Doctor Sleep, but it feels a lot like that as well.
Okay. No, I still haven't gotten around to seeing that one yet.
Mm.
Yeah, and I feel like there is some themes like with grief and loss
Yeah.
in both this movie and Smile,
Hmm.
which I thought was interesting. Actually, kind of very similar, like not necessarily like plot, but kind of like same main character situation, which we are gonna be talking spoilers for both these movies, so
Yeah.
you've been warned. But both movies
Hmm.
have a female protagonist who lost their mom at some point and
Hmm.
didn't seem to ever fully get over it.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of interesting, kind of reminded, like as I was watching Talk to Me, I was kind of reminded of Smile in that way. But yeah, I really liked the. I don't think I'd ever seen an Australian horror movie before, but it seems to be kind of a subgenre of like these lower
Hmm.
budget Australian horror movies, which is kind of interesting. I'll definitely check more out. But
Hmm.
I thought the main concept was very interesting, and I think the trailer doesn't really reveal too much.
Right.
I think it shows enough to be interesting, but there's this whole second thing because like in the trailer they grab onto the hand and say talk to me, but in the
Hmm.
movie that's like the beginning. Then you have to say like I let you in, and then the spirits like possess you.
Right.
So that's kind of an added layer of this is kind of fucked up.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
and I thought it was kind of funny how the kids were just acting, just like using it as like a party game almost.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It
It's
kind of sheds a new light on like because one of the popular criticisms of horror movies is how they make kind of dumb decisions,
yes.
and a lot of the times they're children. You know, a lot of in these horror movies they're like
Hmm.
teenagers. But it kind of puts it into a modern context, and you're like, oh yeah, I guess kids are kind of dumb. It makes sense that they would do something like this.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. Like I think it is definitely kind of like, oh, characters in horror movies making dumb decisions, but at the same time, I feel like this scenario is at least somewhat believable because
Right.
with social, because they were kind of doing it for like social media and stuff, and it's being like, wow, this is
Yep.
crazy.
Yep.
I mean, it's hard to say for sure, but like kids use like Ouija boards and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They have been for
Yep.
years, so I feel like it's not insanely far fetched. I mean, granted, they do like see dead people and then they, get possessed, but even the
Right.
main character, Mia, I think she said that like it feels really good when they're possessed. So I guess it is almost like
Yeah.
I think that kind of leans into the whole drug addiction
Yeah.
thing. Um, so I think they made it pretty believable that they would be,
Mm-hmm.
the stupid like that. And like as the movie progresses, it's pretty obvious like they do what they can to not do that anymore. But I think the movie did a really good job with the makeup for everyone.
Yeah.
Like all the spirits, and then when all the kids got possessed, that was very well done, and like all the
Mm-hmm.
blood and gore and stuff. Which I feel like this movie doesn't. I wasn't sure what to expect. I heard that there was some, violence and gore in it, and I wasn't sure what to expect because, of how violent the creators' YouTube videos are. Um,
Yeah.
but I felt like the violence was sparing, but extremely
Mm-hmm.
upsetting. Like every
Yeah.
time that it was used,
Right.
it didn't become just kind of like gore porn or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It felt somehow like more real and visceral than your average horror movie. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like I feel like I've seen plenty of people, get like smacked around and shot and gutted and everything,
Mm-hmm.
with movies. But like when the kid, I forget his name, or Riley, I think, when he started like
Yeah.
smacking his head on the table, it was just like, oh my god, like I was just like
Right. Right.
cringing really hard. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then later, when he started like smacking his head against the shower wall, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, stop!" And then just like
Right.
how
Right.
like messed up his face was, it was like, "Damn, that was just very upsetting." And even at the beginning, when that one kid like stabbed his brother and stabbed himself in the eye, um,
Mm-hmm.
just all very like violent in it, but it felt like very, I guess, real, like as
Yeah.
opposed to say I don't know, like even like a slasher movie or like a movie where like,
Mm-hmm.
a demon or something is killing people. This felt different, I guess, because it was self-inflicted maybe, and it just
Right.
felt very real, I guess. Oh, and that one scene where um Mia ends up, I guess, like I thought that scene was very interesting where she was speaking to like that one spirit in the hospital, and the spirit said I let you in, and she like went to the other, like basically got a
Oh yeah.
glimpse of whatever limbo spirit realm they're in, and she saw
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like Riley's spirit being tortured. I thought that was done like very well.
Right. Yeah.
It was so effective, just like the sound and the lighting and everything. You didn't like get a good glimpse at anything, and yet it was
Mm-hmm.
still like extremely like upsetting.
Yeah.
um that was super well done. There was a lot of imagery in this that like it wasn't one of those things where it didn't show enough. It showed like
Mm-hmm.
just enough for you to be freaked out without
Right.
being like, oh, it showed too much, or like, well, it showed too little for me to care.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, and I thought they did a good job kind of explaining what the thing was without just like having a character being like, this is exactly what it is. It was more like a
Right.
lore, or like,
Mm.
rumors spread by the kids who've used the hand.
Right.
um I'm trying to remember, like, one of the kids, I think, initially got the hand from somebody else, and I did think it was a little like weird that nobody was like, hey, we need to like actually get rid of this hand, because like it seemed like people in the past have used the hand and it messed them up. So you'd think like somebody would be like, well, let's just get rid of this hand instead of passing it off to a friend, you know? But
Yeah.
I
I
guess
think
not.
the
No.
kid in the beginning gave it to the kid who has it. I don't remember his name, but the one with the long black hair.
Hmm.
Um, But then to what you were saying, I think that kind of goes back to the whole addiction thing where it's like
Mm,
it's bad, but they like it, so they don't want to get rid of it. Like
mm,
kind of like drugs, I guess. Like they know it's bad, but
yeah.
they just can't get rid of it.
Yeah, well, and yeah, even just the whole concept, which, yeah, apparently the concept was by Daley Pearson, who's, I guess, a producer, but he also played Daryl in, like, those Thor, um, like, shorts that Taika Waititi did.
Yeah.
But the concept itself, just kind of like a bunch of kids hanging out at a party, is very reminiscent of, like instead of, like, oh, let's do blow, instead of like, oh, let's get possessed by spirits. No. But just
Right.
like those scenes where they have all those kids out at the party using the hand, did feel like it didn't feel like super obvious, I guess, because once you got into the story, you're like, oh yeah, but when you really think about it, it does feel very much like, oh yeah, I could totally see the hand being swapped out for drugs.
Right.
Um, yeah, what did you think of the toe sucking scene? Oh my
I
god.
thought it was really effective. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely. Like I think that scene, it was very very well done how the spirit was doing it, and then as soon as the kid, like Paul or whatever, woke up, he saw like Mia was the one sucking on his foot, and I was like, "Oh man, that was very
yeah.
well done, very effective, like you said." And I really liked the ending. I don't generally like endings like that that
Mm,
um kind of have you go on this journey with this character just to have them like killed in the end, because I feel like a lot of horror movies do it and it's just like haha, they're dead because it's a horror movie. um
yeah.
I felt like this was very effective because they did a very good fake out at the beginning
Hmm.
where it seems like, yeah, and it's not clear whether she jumped in the road or her friend pushed her to save her brother,
Right.
um
Right.
which I thought was interesting because it kind of left things open to interpretation. Or just like it didn't really
Hmm.
matter that much, to be honest, whether she jumped or not.
Yeah.
She gets hit by like a semi truck or something in the
Right.
road, and then like she's obviously messed up, and but she surprisingly gets up, which I was like thinking like, oh, this is just movie logic where she's but then you see within like a few seconds like, oh, it seems like she's in this other, in that other realm, because she just sort of gets like all of a sudden she's in the hospital and she's seeing Riley going home with his family,
Yeah.
fully healed, and it doesn't take too long before you realize, oh, she's dead and she's one of the spirits that are
Yeah.
hanging out in
Exactly.
this limbo now. And then like that ending shot where she just kind of standing in the darkness and she just sees like a hand outstretched to her, and then you
Right.
you you get to see pretty much the other side of using the hand and like what the spirits see. I thought that was really effective, just really cool imagery and just like really cool full circle.
Yeah. Exactly.
I feel like it kind of gave you like a perspective of like what is going, like what it looks like in that
Hmm.
limbo dimension, but also kind of gave a finality to Mia's character, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
in a way, which I guess that's like how they did it stylistically. I didn't mind at all. Like I felt like it was really well done, and I really liked it. It was a cool ending. It didn't feel like a letdown ending. Like, oh well, she worked this whole
Yeah.
time and now she's dead. It kind of reminded me a bit of the end of Smile too.
Yeah.
So yeah, but all in all, a very cool movie. I was actually very impressed. I was expecting it to be like all right, entertaining, but I ended up really enjoying it.
Yeah. No, I did as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that hand at the end. I'm kind of thinking it might be the other hand because apparently it's in Greece. That ending scene,
Okay.
those people were from Greece, and it was mentioned earlier in the movie that the hand is like this shaman or somebody that like somebody who could speak to the dead, who has like supernatural abilities, and their hands were cut off and embalmed and whatever, and
Mhm.
they mentioned that there was another hand out there somewhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, do you think that's like the same hand that somehow like got its way to Greece, or do you think it's like the other hand that they were talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. 'Cause where was the last? I guess does Mia have it when she died? Did she have the hand
She
in
had
her
it.
backpack?
She had it at her home because her friend showed up at her home and saved her dad, and she saw the
Okay.
hand hanging out like in a bag in her room, in Mia's room.
Okay. So then, I mean, no, I don't think it was the same one.
Yeah, I find it unlikely. Like if she,
Yeah.
because I feel like the friend would just throw it away at this point. I doubt she would keep it unless she's
Right.
stupid. Um,
Exactly.
uh,
Exactly.
so, but like I feel like it would be very unlikely that it would get all the way from Australia to Greece if she like
Right.
disposed of it. So I feel like it's probably the other hand, and I'm trying to remember if it was like the opposite side. I think it was. I think the guy was like holding out his other hand,
Okay. Yeah.
but I'm not 100% sure because I think the hand was a left hand,
Mm.
and I think he was holding out his right hand, meaning that the hand he was using had to be the right one.
Right.
I don't remember.
Right.
I don't remember for sure, but I think so. But I think the directors might have mentioned it, but they were kind of vague about it. But
Right.
I think so. But I thought that was a cool detail, or at least something to think about. And apparently they want to
Right.
make a sequel, which it's confirmed now, which is cool.
Yeah.
I like seeing smaller filmmakers, people haven't done a whole lot, or people who did things independently, get some traction, and then get like a bigger budget or something. You get to make
Right.
more. Like the director of the Terrifier movies, since Terrifier 2 was
Mhm.
such a success, now he's signed on to a major agency, and
Oh,
I believe he's making a third movie with a bigger budget, a third Terrifier
oh, good
movie.
friend.
So yeah, it's kind of cool when you
Yeah.
see success stories like that. But yeah, let's talk briefly about Smile, since we did
Yeah.
before, but I've never actually put anything out. So
Mhm,
this
mhm.
was easily my favorite horror movie last year.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think it just did such a good job. Just like it made me so damn anxious the whole movie.
Right. Yeah.
It just did such a they did such a good job building the tension the whole time without you necessarily having to see the monster or whatever it was the whole time. Like they did a really good job making you think you were gonna see it in like every corner, and
Right.
that was the experience of the main character. So they did a really good job making you experience at least a modicum of what the main character was.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And what's her name, Sochi Bacon,
Yeah.
um, who is Kevin Bacon's daughter. I don't know why I didn't put that together until like a while after I saw the movie. Um,
Right.
but she did a really good job.
Hmm, hmm.
I think I've seen it
Yeah, I
twice.
don't know what else was she in. I don't remember.
She was in 13 Reasons Why,
Okay.
um, briefly, and she was in Mare of Easttown. Like
Mm.
not a whole lot of stuff. This was her first leading role, I believe, but
Okay.
she did a very good job.
Yeah,
Make
she did.
just like being just like losing her mind the whole movie, basically.
Hmm.
Which yeah, I think Talk to Me was definitely an allegory for drugs. This seemed to be symbolic of trauma. Um,
Right.
I think especially undealt with trauma,
Yeah.
because throughout the movie, which I didn't really think about, but I read like some article later that mentioned this. Um, what's the main character, Rose? She
Yes.
doesn't like, after maybe like one or two attempts, she doesn't really get any actual help besides like her
Mm.
cop ex-boyfriend, but
Right.
she sees her therapist once, but then the rest of the
Hmm.
movie, no, twice, I think. but the rest of the movie she doesn't really reach out to her therapist.
Right.
And I feel like maybe that was kind of like how why the movie ended the way it was, where she wasn't able to
Mhm.
beat the whatever you want to call it, the trauma monster or something.
Right.
Um, and speaking of that, like that ending was a very good misdirect. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I definitely did not see that coming when I first saw it, because it seemed like a very, like she defeated the monster thing, and at the very end she reunites with Joel,
Mm.
and then it turns out it was all in her head the whole time, which I think was a very interesting take
Yeah.
on a monster, because it really is in like the person's head. It kind of
Right.
possesses them, but it doesn't like control them. It just messes with their head and oppresses them,
Yes.
and makes them see stuff and makes them
Right.
like see stuff to the point where they think they're doing it, because there's that one point where she thinks she kills that mentally ill guy at the hospital.
Mm.
So yeah, it just very well done. Like all of the like the beginning with that one girl setting her up, and they did a good job kind of. I really liked the whole investigative aspect of it, where Rose was trying to figure everything out, and you kind of see, that this thing has left like a long trail of bodies, basically.
Right.
But I feel like they left enough things vague where it didn't feel like exposition. It felt more that she was
Mm.
uncovering stuff,
Right.
which I thought was
Right.
cool. And I definitely like. I don't know. I kind of would like to see more, just because it was so good. I like all sequels. I feel like it definitely opens the door to kind of ruining it.
Right. Right.
um, like as long as they didn't get too, because like say like there's movies like I don't know if you've ever seen The Boy,
No, I haven't.
but that one's actually pretty interesting, because at the end it's like this whole time you think like the doll's possessed, and in the end it turns out that it's actually like a grown man living in the walls. And there are like a bunch of like secret passages and stuff in the house, so he's able to like move stuff around to make it seem like there's supernatural stuff. um but then in the second movie, they just kind of throw that all out the window, and they're just like, just kidding. The doll is possessed, and it just kind of like,
Mm.
well, that kind of ruins it. So I feel like if
Right.
they could make a sequel that didn't ruin the lore and still kind of kept that like paranoia aspect, it could
Yeah.
be interesting.
Because I really like the way this movie ended with like
Mm-hmm.
it's a metaphor for like trauma and stuff. So
Yes.
it's like yeah, you can't really like get rid of it. Like it's still there and you can treat it, but I don't think it's ever really gone. And so like
Right.
I'm not sure how you would make another movie and have it not have like a similar ending. You know, like if in the sequel like they somehow figure out how to defeat the monster, I think that kind of cheapens it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the only way they would be able to do that is if I don't know. Yeah, like it's kind of hard, because when you are dealing with something like a real world thing like trauma, it's like
Yeah.
how do you make something that is trying to clearly define how you're supposed to deal with it, because it's like
Right. Right.
it's not a cut and dry thing in real life, and it's different for different people.
Mhm.
But I did really like. I thought that was super interesting the way it transferred to people. Was it forced other people to watch
Yeah.
the person commit suicide? Like I feel like not only is that just an interesting concept, um, but it also is very very interesting symbolism. Whereas like the
Yeah.
trauma, or like in this case the monster, but in real life, like the trauma like transfers from one person to the other, and
Mhm.
it's very interesting how it shows. It kind of addresses how people can basically transfer their trauma onto other people, like say especially people like who are in a relationship with somebody else, or parents to their kids, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like I feel like the only way they could really do a good sequel is if they maybe tackle another aspect of trauma that they didn't in this movie. um
Right.
because like in this it was mainly the main character Rose and her mom, and how her mom like committed suicide,
Hmm.
um and was battling with depression and then committed suicide. So I don't know, maybe like the main character is dealing with another kind of trauma, but like you said, it would kind of
Sure.
cheapen, it could kind of cheapen the message if not done right. So yeah,
Right.
I don't
Right.
know. Part of me wants to see more because it was so good, but part of me doesn't
Yeah.
because I don't want it to. So, but
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah, very good. So honestly, these two movies, Talk to Me and Smile, are some of them. So some of my favorites that have come out recently, the last few years.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I feel like we've got a steady stream of like okay to bad horror movies. You know,
Mm,
I feel like these were
right.
two like really big standouts because they have interesting concepts. They're actually scary, which I find a lot of horror
Mm,
movies aren't. They're just kind of
right.
like gory or like jump scares, and they expect that to be like scary. But for me, it's like it's more the concept and the way it's presented
Mm,
that's scary, or like
right.
the
Right.
imagery. Um,
Hmm.
so and also just the kind of the whole thing with Smile is um kind of talking about, or kind of commentary on how people who are dealing with like depression or trauma or whatnot just kind of are expected to put on a smile, put on a brave face and smile through it all.
Right.
And that's kind of, I think they were kind of playing with that idea, which I think is very smart, honestly. The director and writer Parker Finn. I'm not sure, like,
Hmm.
has he done a whole lot else? Not really.
No, this is his first movie.
Interesting. So yeah, I would
Yeah.
definitely, if not a sequel, I'd definitely like to see more horror from him.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that would be very cool. So yeah, all that to say, very cool. Even though it was from Paramount, it felt like an indie movie.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, both very good horror movies. If you have not seen these, and you're a horror fan, definitely check them out. They're very good.
Right.
But yeah, is anything else
Um,
you wanted to add about these movies?
no, I think we pretty much covered it all.
Nice. All right. Well, wrap things up. Let's talk about the dumbest things we've seen on the internet recently. Um, so for me, it kind of ties into that Jay Oliva thing he was talking about, where he said apparently when they were making Man of Steel,
Mhm.
and they made that, there was that scene where Superman crashes his, like, his escape pod to Earth, like into, well, they use it to basically send all the Kryptonians back to the Phantom Zone and everything, and it destroys the pod as well. Apparently,
Yeah.
some of the executives fought them on this because they said, "Well, if you destroy his ship, how does Superman get back to Krypton?" And it's just like kind of shows the headspace of the Warner Brothers executives and how little they
Right.
actually knew about DC, and yeah, just kind of sad. But
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, did you have anything?
I did have one thing. So on our other podcast a few weeks ago, there's a new series that started. It was the World's Finest Teen Titans. So it's the original team. It's Robin,
Hmm.
Wonder Girl, Aqualad, like the sidekick characters, the
Yeah.
original Teen Titan. And somebody on the internet doesn't really understand that, and she said, I don't know. Oh, I don't know if it was she. They said, um, the Titans are trash without Raven and Starfire, and I thought that was really funny
Oh
because
boy.
why them specifically, I don't know why they decided those are the only good characters, but I just thought
Yeah,
it
I
was
guess
really funny that, yeah. I mean, that's a very specific thing that only some people would understand, but yeah,
it's
I haven't really seen anything dumb on the internet recently other than that.
it sounds like somebody who only really knows the Titans from the cartoon.
Exactly, exactly.
Which, I mean, yeah, if that's your thing, but also it's like I don't get when people sound off on stuff they don't really know about.
Right,
Uh,
right,
but
exactly.
it's the internet, whatever.
Yeah,
But yeah,
definitely is.
that is our podcast. Thank you so much for listening. This podcast comes out every other Wednesday, and
Hmm?
I do upload it to the YouTube as well. So if you want to check out the video versions, they are on our YouTube channel, Casual Experts, which, by the way, check that out. check us out on social media, casual underscore experts on Instagram and Twitter, and then on TikTok, it's just casual experts. Those links are in the description, as well as the link to our other podcast, The Cultured Pull List, which is all about comic books and comic reviews, graphic novels, all that stuff. We do that in
Right.
partnership with The Cultured Nerd, and it's got its own social media and YouTube channel as well. So check that out. All those links
Hmm.
in the description, and we'll see you next time.